Thank you. I've got a short presentation today. I'm going to talk a little bit about threats, about what we're seeing, and about what we're doing to try and mitigate the threats. First of all, Dell SecureWorks. So I work in the research team for Dell SecureWorks. I look after the European part of the research team. We provide consulting services, threat intelligence services, and managed services, which is our core. We operate in 70 countries. We have 4,500 customers where we manage their and monitor their security infrastructure on a 24/7 basis. Every day we process 130 billion security events on behalf of our customers. Last year that was 40 trillion security events. So we see quite a lot of stuff. If we're considering the threat landscape, for me, it's kind of characterized a bit by the fact that we've got changing threat actors. When I first started in this business, you could characterize the hackers as being explorers. They were really just trying to hack into computers to see what they could see. They had no ultimate goal or intent beyond that. They were just looking around to see what they could find. And then people decided that they could get a reputation, so we moved into an age of what I call the graffiti artists. Not long after that, the bad guys realized they could monetize this. So 2004, 2005, we saw the emergence of banking Trojans, man-in-the-browser attacks with web injects and all that fun. More recently, we've seen the rise of hacktivists, we've seen journalists get involved, and of course, nation-state actors or spooks. So we've got all of these different threat actors with different motivations, different appetites for risk, and different tradecraft. So what are they doing? If we consider threat is intent and capability, what is the intent of these different threat actors today? Well, you can neatly summarize it into one of four categories. Either they're trying to gain money one way or another, steal it, migrate it, move it, or they're trying to steal information, ideas, intellectual property, or they're trying to disrupt you temporarily, a denial of service attack. We've seen plenty of those all of the time. Or they're trying to destroy you. Absolutely. And again, we've seen wiper attacks like the big casino in the US and obviously Shamoon with Saudi Aramco. So four main goals, four main intents. Steal money, steal ideas and intellectual property, disrupt temporarily, or disrupt permanently. If we jump into e-crime, and with our visibility, what do we see? So this little scatter plot shows on the x-axis, we have events on a log scale. So it's going 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. So anything that's off to the right is uber successful. Clients impacted are on the y-axis. So if we're to zoom in right to where the crosshairs are, we would say APT attacks. But anything you see on the right or at the top is obviously commodity malware. And what do we see from looking at the commodity malware, the commodity e-crime stuff? The top four event-generating malware families accounted for more than 85% of all observed malware events in February 2015. So according to the Economist's rule of three, let's call it a rule of four rather than a rule of three, we're looking at a consolidated mature marketplace when we have a handful of people in the market that are responsible for the vast majority of the noise. And in fact, we have a market that's full of service providers. Neverquest, Dridex, and Dyer are three of the best-known current banking Trojan families. And you need to think about these guys not themselves as criminals, but as service providers in a criminal marketplace. And there are real criminals, people who may well have been making money from drugs and guns in the past, that are procuring these services from multiple service providers. And if we take out one service provider, all they do is they go and procure their services from somewhere else. So there needs to be parallel operations to try and defeat these bad guys. You can give them a bloody nose by taking down a particular botnet, but actually to take them out permanently, you need to go where the money is. Different Trojans operate differently. In the case of GOZI and Neverquest, it's very vertically integrated. So you can see here the trust level, the internal and external thing here is whether it's all the same actor group that is doing the work. For some of these banking Trojan families, the entire marketplace is spread out where someone is doing the exploitation, somebody different is providing services for writing the web injects, someone else is coding the actual malware. But in the case of GOZI Neverquest, it's fairly integrated. So that's a quick fly through an example of banking Trojan. If we think of cryptographic ransomware, which is obviously not very good, you turn up one day and you find that your files are encrypted. We had an example tail end of last year with a customer in the UK that sent us this. This was a fairly compelling phish that dropped cryptographic ransomware, said they had a parcel, redirected to a web page, which in fact used the style sheets from the legitimate Royal Mail website, so it had the right look and feel, and then dropped something that claimed to be Cryptolocker, in fact was something we call Torrent Locker. But this demonstrates something else that we've got. The bad guys can see that money can be made, and there are plenty of copycats, except in this case, the copycat wasn't very smart. So what they did to encrypt the files in this case was that they just used a single XOR key of a finite length. So it was up to 2 meg. So if we could find one file that was more than 2 meg in plain text and encrypt text, then we could recover the XOR key and decrypt all the files, which we did for that customer. So you have some of the most advanced criminals in the world in the e-crime marketplace, and you've got lots of copycat script kiddies that make daft mistakes. The advanced guys are very advanced. We know of researchers who've been phoned up by people purporting to be recruitment consultants, asking them to describe their experience, which has later turned out to be Eastern European criminal gangs trying to identify just how far we had understood their malware, how had we got through the various tricks and all the rest of that. So they were doing their own operational security to work out what was going on. How do we mitigate this? Well, as I said, we can mow the lawn. We can give the bad guys a bloody nose. Dell SecureWorks, we did this with the FBI and the National Crime Agency in the UK on the Gameover Zeus and Cryptolocker takedown. So that's a quote from the FBI press release, unprecedented private sector collaboration, namely Dell SecureWorks. So that was good, but 12 weeks later, the bad guys came back with dry decks. So it is just mowing the lawn to keep the weeds down, and in the background, law enforcement has to do the hard work of identifying the real criminals. Okay, let's shift over onto targeted attacks. In a similar energy vein, we uncovered this campaign by some bad guys that are purported to be Russian, where remote access systems for industrial control systems, the actual software vendors of these remote access tool sets had their websites compromised, and the MSI installers were tainted to drop a copy of the Havex Trojan. So if you went to download MBConf tool from the legitimate supplier's website, you were getting a free piece of Russian malware with it. Suppliers were compromised to compromise others. We tracked this campaign until May, June last year, where 2 other security companies decided it was more important to get some cheap marketing out of it rather than to track the bad guys. So they published, and the bad guys went immediately dark. We're trying to work out if we can still track these bad guys, still today. And here's the question. Has the threat gone? Are they not interested in oil and gas since June last year? So like I said, we think these come from Russia. This may not translate into Icelandic, but if we think of Russia as a sausage factory, then the sausage factory basically is oil and gas out and dollars in for 60% of their actual GDP. So the vast majority of it is actually oil rather than gas. If we then look at what's happened with the dollar versus the ruble, so the ruble's worth half of what it was, the oil price is worth half of what it was. So if we go back to the figures here, $288 billion times 0.25, so Russia definitely has a significant problem that amounts to billions of dollars in terms of what's happening with the ruble and the oil price. You can see they've got rampant inflation, depletion of reserves. Is the bad guy not interested in what's going on in the energy sector and oil and gas? Of course he is. The threat is the actor, not the malware. The malware is no longer used. The actor is still active, and we know we need to reacquire him. We need to know who he is and what he's doing. And that's what you need to think about. You need to know who your enemy is. You need to think about it. It's not a what, it's not a how. It's a who and a why. What do you have that others want? Who might target your organization? Who do you do business with that may be a target? And think about the state-sponsored threat actors. Think about the investments that countries like China, Russia, the United States, the UK, Israel, France, North Korea, and Iran. All of these countries have major offensive cyber programs. If any of them have an interest in you, then it's going to make your life particularly difficult. If people speaking the same native language as me have an interest in you, then it's even more difficult. With the stuff that was exposed on the equation group, on hiding rootkits within space that's unobserved on hard drives, one of our researchers who knows a lot about this stuff said the only truly secure computer is one that is in pieces broken at the bottom of the sea. Some of you may have worked out I'm Scottish. That, believe it or not, is Scotland. That's the slide I like to put up when it's just got about as bad as it gets in the presentation. So how do you guys get better? Well, first of all, you need to understand what the bad guys are doing. You need to have a decent intelligence function. You need to monitor the absolute hell out of your entire environment. Make sure you are forensically ready. And think about what you're monitoring. Think about your aperture. Think about whether you have enabled the right logs in your Windows environment. Think about whether your IPS has the right signatures on it. Think about your aperture carefully. Hire a bunch of security superheroes. Yeah, if you don't have security superheroes, we've got lots of security superheroes. Focus on process and people, because all the vendors in the world will sell you technology, but all of the incidents I've spoken about there before, people had invested millions in technology, but had failures in people and process. When the inevitable happens, make sure you've got a good team that can help you manage the incident. And if you don't, then people like us, we will come along and help you with it. So that's all from me. I think generally you may have people coming up and saying, it's nice to be here in Iceland. I've never been here before. Believe it or not, that is me. Oh, yeah, I know. It's not so good these days, is it? 1987. Actually, I was last here a month ago. It's great to be here. I love Iceland. I think the place is fantastic. The people are lovely. Thank you very much.